What do you think of when you imagine the best manga? The best story which perfectly ties everything together? The most engaging characters? An immaculate setting and world building? Maybe you just want the coolest fights, or perhaps you're more into conflict of the mental variety. And of course, it would have to have jaw-dropping artwork. What if you had all of these things? Well, then you'd be imagining the perfect manga. Then it's certainly asking for too much, but imagine if it released consistently on a weekly schedule. What if you didn't have to imagine? When one enters into the world of seinen manga, there are many titles which come to mind. Berserk, Vagabond, Monster, 20th Century Boys, Kingdom, Vinland Saga. All of these titles certainly get brought up. They're advertised as the pinnacle of the medium, the series for those who've gone beyond the stage of casual consumption, and well, they're pretty good, I guess. Usogui is not in that category. It's more obscure. The foundation for the genius of this manga is the organization through which the plot revolves, a secret society known as Club Kakuro. The premise of the organization is that it employs 101 referees to oversee the gambles of its 48 members. Kakuro has three main objectives: to enforce rules agreed upon by gambling participants, to make sure that bets are paid, and to keep things exciting. The concept is frankly simple, but the way this organization creates interesting conflict is truly unmatched. I consider Kakuro the perfect Deus Ex Machina, a device which artificially progresses the plot, but in this case simultaneously exists as a predictable element. What in any other story creates a deadlocked negotiation which stalls the plot, instead lends itself to becoming an incredible gamble, due to the existence of Kakuro. For example, towards the end of the story, Baku and his opponent Lalo each hold on to half of what they need. Instead of giving up or having some contrived negotiation, the solution is unbelievably simple. All they have to do is contact Kakuro and have an organized gamble. In this case, the referees proceed to create and oversee possibly the most intricate mind game in all of fiction. Kakuro is genuinely the most brilliant component of Usogui. Its existence is what allows the manga to mix so many different concepts and details within a story where everything, and I mean everything, is perfectly interwoven. Characters will hatch plans that come into fruition literally hundreds of chapters later because they perfectly account for how Kakuro can be creatively used. For this reason, no other series manages the depths of foreshadowing and planning that we see in Usogui. Usogui has an excellent cast of characters. Baku is the classic, mysterious protagonist, and it's executed so well. From the very first chapter, we know that something is up, but the author meticulously drizzles the info about his past, so sparingly that each drop is like discovering water in a desert. In every arc, we get a little bit more about Baku, but coupled with that is a deeper layer of mystery, which raises another question. Then you get to the final arc, and it all comes together in perfect harmony with the thematic tension of the narrative and the absolutely absurd plan in which everything along the way was accounted for. The catharsis is truly unmatched. I'm not gonna spoil that ending, it was insane. Baku's personality is also something else. He's extremely calculating and undeniably cold-hearted, but as a result, he's also extremely reliable. Someone who can always be counted on, no matter how dire the situation. He's also just fun. Beneath the desire for victory, Baku just loves to gamble, and he projects this love through the pages, filling his every move with excitement. You never really know what he will do next. Baku's a top 5 protagonist, without a doubt, but he's only the second best character in Usogui. The leader of Club Kakuro, Kiruma Soichi, He needs his own video, but I'll try to summarize why he is the greatest antagonist of all time without revealing too much. Soichi's character is almost completely hidden for the first half of the manga, but when his story starts being fleshed out, the story really kicks into high gear. To contrast Baku's chaotic demeanor, Soichi is extremely calm and always moving towards success with unwavering certainty. This concept may sound boring, and perhaps it is in a vacuum, but in context, serious decisions become truly frightening. Chaos is almost an escape, that because there is chaos, anything can happen. And because anything can happen, there's always hope. Soichi then represents the opposite, a man who grasps the future in the palm of his hand, the perfect leader and the killer of hope. As if his character wasn't interesting enough, Soichi also has multiple identities within himself. Each identity strives for perfection, yet each approaches it in a different way. In one identity, Soichi is the greatest friend, willing to sacrifice his life in place of another. In another identity, he is the greatest troll, making mockeries of all who oppose him. In yet another, he is the alien who's come to invade Earth, the isolated man with no tie to any other. All these identities, however, lead down the same path. They all converge upon the same ending, with a description of perfection more insightful than I've seen anywhere else. Soichi's achievement of perfection is honestly the greatest character arc ever written. Aside from these two, we also have a fun set of side characters and arc villains. We meet a great number of the 101 Kakuro referees, each with a unique understanding of the nature of their role as referee. Their ideologies are genuinely interesting to watch play out, especially because the referees regularly fight each other, and of course all of them are ridiculously strong. We also have Baku's main allies, Kaji and Marco. Kaji is basically a normal guy at the beginning, but he really wants to help Baku. And his development, in contrast to Baku's constant excellence, provides a great parallel. Marco is a bruiser who carries Baku through physical conflict, but mentally he's basically a child, which makes him very easy to root for. The mechanics of a story are regularly the most overlooked, which is strange since mechanics make up the bulk of most stories, especially manga. Big ideas and profound themes are nice, but it definitely helps to have plot details that are worth reading in their own right. And oh boy, are the plot details in Usogui worth reading. The games Sako came up with vary greatly in complexity, but are always explored to their limits, with strategies massively transcending what would be initially perceived as possible. The characters will spend entire arcs on deep plays, just to reveal later down the stretch that said plays were bluffs meant to conceal their true intentions, at which point Baku unveils the fact that their bluffs were seen through from the very beginning and repurposed into a tool which turns the tables. This will then happen multiple times both ways, with the supposed true meaning behind a bluff instead constituting another bluff, all of which is ultimately seen through and manipulated by Baku, part of what it means to eat lies, to see through a lie and act in a way to reverse its effect. The general idea is repeated, but each instance is so dang creative that you'll never see it coming. The outcomes of the games can be described succinctly as too perfect, in the sense that the solutions the characters come up with are the absolute best solutions in the given context, and that every single potential factor is properly accounted for from the very beginning. My favorite line in the whole series encapsulates this idea. After beautifully turning around a game against his opponent, Soichi drops the following: "You didn't decide it yourself. I allowed you to make that decision." The opponent's every action, including what he thought were acts of creativity, were preempted and forced by Soichi from the beginning of the fight. Every single event played out exactly as was diligently calculated, long before the game ever began. Soichi isn't just vaguely outsmarting his opponents via a statement for merely a narrative purpose. Instead, the way in which he orchestrates everything is logically explained and demonstrated in a mechanically sound fashion to show his overwhelming genius. I will be giving my subjective analysis and interpretation in this section because there are so many layers to the ideas that no short platitude would give it enough credit. I believe that the primary message of Usogui relates to the essence of lies, and that its themes ultimately revolve around this question. As opposed to the moral question of lies, Usogui concerns itself with the practical element of lies. In fact, Baku lies from the start of chapter 1. He conjures up a story of Kaji having a non-existent lawyer in order to scare off his debt collectors. So then, what's the message? Lies are weak. A lie is used to cover up for an imperfection, to mask over a person's weakness. The power of a lie lies not in the reality of a proposition, but rather its falsehood. In other words, it is granted not by the person telling the lie, but rather by the person believing it. To eat a lie, then, is to acknowledge its falsehood, and not merely to recognize it abstractly, but to use it as a portal to the weakness which it is meant to cover up. This idea is reflected on the mechanical level in the games, where in the attempt to deceive Baku, the opponent ultimately gives away that which they wish to hide. It also plays on the thematic level, where in each arc a different type of weakness is exposed. Control versus incompetence, conviction versus fear, order versus chaos, security versus insecurity, destiny versus will, the ideal versus the erratic. These are the individual themes in the various arcs of Usogui, but each represents a different clash between a lie and the weakness beneath it. The order of the corrupt police department resides upon the covering up of the chaos underneath. The faith in destiny means to mistrust one's own will. Since Baku is the eater of lies, a question then must be raised. What sustenance do the lies provide? What is it all for? I think the answer to this question is that Baku lives his own lie, his very life a borrowed one. His obsession then is to make his lie real, to gain the strength to overcome weakness, to become the enormous evil that dominates evil. In his quest to devour, Baku represents the cold truth which annihilates pale facades, but his own conflict is the most fundamental one: fact versus fiction. Baku does not live in the world of fact, rather he quite literally lives in the world of fiction, a book the details of which I will not go into. Fiction is by definition not real, but in a way it is potentially real. The ideas in fiction can become manifest. The power of a lie comes not from the teller, but from the believer. For that reason, Baku never tells his lie, he instead simply believes. For in doing so, it stops being a lie, it becomes potential. And in actualizing that potential, it becomes real. To believe in oneself, however, requires strength. The strength to actualize what is merely potential. To tell a lie, then, is the disbelief in oneself, the surrender to weakness. I think a phrase can sum up this distinction quite nicely. Hope versus despair. Every antagonist lies and ultimately experiences despair, in that the moment the lie is exposed, all that remains is weakness. Baku, on the other hand, experiences hope, as through every lie he eats, he becomes closer to actualizing the fiction he believes in. What I especially love about this core idea is how it doesn't annoyingly moralize the issue. The story doesn't beat you over the head with how, you need to be empathetic or nice, nor does it complain about people being mean or toxic. Instead, the story is very serious about the imperfections in our nature. Baku himself is crazy and a little psychotic, but but we don't have some obnoxious author insert pestering him about it, as that kind of behavior doesn't change people, it just ticks them off. Nor does the story even promote acting like Baku does in the arrogant, universalist way you see in media these days. He has a very particular life goal, which is not meant to be emulated, as it is unique to his own context. So often nowadays, a work is characterized either as promoting an ideology or satirizing said ideology. But Usogui, in its nuance, does neither of these things, as it explores things in a human way, not needlessly rationalizing, but instead showing the spirit, including all its deceit, which really guides the human experience. I would love to talk about Soichi's relations and contributions to the themes, and there's so much to go into that, again, it can get its own video. So I'll hold off for the video. Life is just like a gamble that no one can win. In the end, everyone ends up dying. In the end, everyone ends up losing. It is especially because there is an end that people during a gamble shine. The ultimate truth of Usogui is that no one can win the gamble of life. That to pretend it is possible is a lie in and of itself. To shine then is to accept reality for what it is, to see through the false promises and devour the lies, to use one's own strength in the gamble itself. The end is inevitable, therefore one must write one's own fiction with the end in mind, to truthfully draw the final hand in the gamble called life. And that's the end of the video. Well, I'll talk a little bit about the art. It definitely takes its time to improve, being a little weird early on, but by the end it's the best you'll ever see in a weekly manga, and it's freakishly consistent. And it's so creative with the visual metaphors. Top tier art, fights, writing, themes, character setting, mind games, all combined together with perfect synergy, doing everything that a story ought and arguably being the best in the whole medium at all of it. That's the perfect manga right there. If you'd like to read Usogui, the best place is mangadex.org. The translation by Team Duwang is incredibly well done. Make sure you give it a chance, I'm sure you'll love it. I'm trying to rumble because imagine calling yourself a rumbler. It's rumbling time. That's amazing. Also, the whole sphere is so underdeveloped, I think it's a good opportunity. If you're watching on Rumble, leave a like, drop a follow, and if you're on YouTube, obviously, subscribe to the channel for more.